Hey, all, welcome back to the Plugged In podcast. So, we're talking about the digitalization of education. I'm Maddie.
Hi everyone, I'm Monica.
Hey everyone, I'm Bobby Faye.
And I'm Cameron.
And last time we talked about the impact COVID-19 had on the digitalization of education. And today we're going to dive into the impacts and some of the negative sides that the digitalization has had on education.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Bobby Faith covered in our first episode, our world and with it, education, of course, has become more and more digital. And COVID-19 accelerated that trend. I think it was already kind of trending that way to begin with. As far as, I think it went from going to college, it was like, hey, we recommend a laptop, to a point where it was like, no, you definitely need to have one. And COVID-19 just kind of accelerated that trend when everything went to remote. So what we're seeing now is something called the digital gap or the digital divide. And so what this is it's an economic inequity between socioeconomic groups in terms of access to technology. This would be, could be hardware like a computer, laptop, tablet, what have you, or access to broadband or high-speed internet. I found some interesting figures according to a May 2020 report. So this is a couple months into the COVID-19 pandemic. If you think back to May of 2020, that was around the time where we were all, in a virtual environment. This was a May 2020 report from the Abell Foundation. 77% of households had a desktop or laptop computer, but what's concerning is when you start to break that up by income group, you start to see an inequity. It was only about half of those earning under $25,000 a year had home access to a computer, followed by 70% in the $25,000 to $50,000 range, and then all the way up to the top bracket, which would have been $100,000 or more, it was in the 90%. So you can see that the lower end of the scale, where in theory these students are already at a disadvantage, they also don't have access to technology that I think is critical right now.
Yeah. And what just came to mind with that is you emphasized home access, right? And I think a lot of times we're like, well, the schools have it on campus. But as our school has shifted to a lot more like in-home online work, you can't necessarily be on campus, right? To go to the library and use the internet, right? So like that's a huge gap too.
Well, and if you think about it too, schools are offering, and this is pre-COVID and then currently now, I think, as you start to see more opportunities for digital education right now, who generally speaking, a lot of students that look at virtual learning are going to be the students that, are tend to be busy as far as, work commitments, life commitments. You don't always have time to go to campus, even when it is open. And then as we saw with COVID, it's not always open, of course. And I think one thing that we have to know I mentioned COVID, the pandemic didn't really close that technology gap at all. In 2021, the Pew Research Center did a report that for students that are Americans that are earning less than $30,000 a year, 27% rely on just their smartphone for internet access. And for those earning $30,000 to $99,000, it's only 11%. So this is students that their only access to the internet is their smartphone, which if you think about it, I think if you've been in a college level course, smartphone doesn't really cut it for in-depth research, for writing papers, doing projects. And so they also found that cell phone dependency is highest among African American and Latinx students as well.
And I can't even imagine, right? You're a college student, you have to do class from your cell phone, you have to do a research paper from your phone. And on top of that, how are you paying it, right? Like, I'm sure these students have to hold on multiple jobs or positions to be able to pay it, because I know internet costs are really high in the US, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So for the lowest income groups, only less than 60%, about 55 to 57%, have home broadband. That would be home high speed internet, and about 27%, so a little over a quarter of all Americans don't have home broadband internet access. You know, and in 2020, again, you keep going back to that year, such a critical year, and I think in human history as we go forward. But in 2020, the Open Technology Institute published that they feel that there's an affordability crisis in the United States as far as how much it costs for internet access. And I think for some generations, you know, internet might be the first, whenever they're in a tight spot, internet might be one of the first things that they choose to cut, as far as from their monthly expenditures. You're going to pay your rent, you're going to pay your car payment, you're going to get groceries, of course. So then you start to look at, well, yeah, I might need it for school, but you know, I can go without internet for a couple weeks to save a few bucks. So again, these are students that are already at a disadvantage, and because of this digital gap, as higher education becomes more digitalized, you're starting to see that gap grow, and it creates more inequity.
Yeah, I think that leads also to a conversation besides affordability, right? Like it's creating a gap, sure, right, of access to the resources that are being offered by their institutions, by their professors, right? If I can't download a PDF or an article as a student, how am I going to do my homework, right? So that's obviously a bigger conversation on, you know, academic outcomes and academic success. But it all starts here with that accessibility to, you know, internet, which, you know, nowadays I believe, right, that it's all right. Everyone should have access to it in this digital world.
Yeah. And I think that's something I want to say, and I don't know this for sure, but I think over time, somewhere I read that the UN, the United Nations, actually considers internet access to be a human right now. Or at least there's a movement for it to be recognized as a human right. And so as we look at it, you know, we're all studying to be higher education professionals. As we look at it, you know, we should strive for equal opportunities. We should strive for for equity, not inequity. We should strive for equity in education. And I think, you know, we all recognize that higher education has a lot of potential to be a driver for economic opportunity and economic mobility. But if we don't address this digital gap, you know, that's going to be a barrier to ultimately closing the gaps that we want to close. And then also, I think another question, you know, if digitalized education is here to stay, if we're going to be doing things more virtual, you know, meetings are held virtual now, even though a lot of campuses have moved somewhat back into a quote unquote normal system. How can we build community behind a screen? You know, I think we mentioned in the last episode, we all go to class together. We've never even met in person. I feel great community with you guys, but other students might need that face-to-face access. And so I think that's another issue that, you know, we need to address as we move into higher education. There are some positives for digitalized education. I think Maddie's going to get into that in the next episode. But, you know, I think ultimately you look at these issues and you see kind of this inequity, and it's a really good opportunity for a movement towards equality, equity, and social justice as well.
Absolutely, I agree. It's the root of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So we hope you guys join us for our next episode. And we're looking forward to getting into that discussion of kind of where we go from here.